Welcome to the Player Driven Podcast. Here's what we're about to listen to in today's episode. We are talking with Ben Kvalo. He is the founder of Midwest Games, and he's going to talk to us about what the role of a publisher is. It's an ever-evolving role, which he'll talk about how it transitions from facilitating distribution to now offering things like marketing, QA, and a lot of other things you can think about as well. How timing and market awareness are crucial, right? As much as a good game is important, making sure it's timed right in the market is very important as well. And then balancing trade-offs as well for developers, right? When you look for a publisher, an indie has to take a look at what the trade-offs might be when retaining revenue, IP control, and so on. It's a really informative conversation we have with Ben today. Let us know what you think afterwards. Let us know if you have any other questions for Ben. We'd love to talk more through it, and enjoy the episode. Hey everybody, welcome to Player Driven. Today we are joined by Ben Kvalo. He is the founder of Midwest Games, and he has a portfolio or a summary of jobs that go back to 2K as a project manager, as well as a project manager at Blizzard. He led program management at Netflix, and he's also serving as the president of the Wisconsin Gaming Alliance. Ben, it's a pleasure to have you back. Is there anything you want to say?
No, just excited to be here. Excited to chat as always. It's always something fun when we get a chance to chat.
Yeah, I love it and I appreciate it. And it's Friday before the holidays, so I appreciate you making the time. But today I want to really kind of talk about what a publisher is, because I remember growing up loving video games and seeing published by, developed by, and I always wonder, like, what does that really mean? And now that I'm in the industry, it makes a little more sense to me, but I'm hoping we could kind of explain to some other people that may not really understand the full concept is let's start is, can you just kind of give us the breakdown of what the role of a publisher is?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting and complicated in the same breath. And if you think about the game development and then getting ultimately to store shelves, because like the history of publishing has changed over time. If you look at what traditional publishing did, it was literally it brokered the relationship between somebody that was trying to put out content and the literal shelves that that content lived on at one point. And so, for a long history within the publishing realm, it was the ownership of those channels. And it was really hard for somebody as an individual content creator to put out something to a channel. Now that's changed over time. If you look at Steam and many other platforms, it's much easier to get it onto a platform than ever before. And so the relationship of a publisher has changed with that. It's more about, well, how do you get noticed on these platforms? Knowing kind of the people and the algorithms and all of the things that are going that are happening on a platform. And so a publisher really, if you to simplify it down, is a developer works on the game and a publisher works on everything around the game to make sure that it is going to market in the best possible way with everything that's needed. And a publisher knows what is needed and the most up-to-date information. A game typically takes, at the least like 12, 18 months to multiple years, 3 to 7 years. And the platforms change over that time period. So if you're a developer and you're only going to platform with those cadences, by the time you have returned to a platform to put your game on it, it's changed dramatically from the time you did before. And so a publisher is always up to date with that information, which allows you to, your velocity to market is much faster than it would be if you're just trying to figure it out every time you go. There's very few publishers worldwide, and there's a lot of game developers. And so I think that's always kind of been a challenge. And also the other thing I'll say about, kind of just publishing in general is a lot of it comes down to the money aspect of things. And traditionally, there were no avenues to get your game made unless you had personal dollars that you were able to do. And so the publisher's role was also helped fund it. Now there's so many other routes to get funding that a publisher, their job is not solely the funding piece. And in fact, I think it's going to be changing even further, where it's really the services piece, and something that we're expanding upon at Midwest as well.
Can you break that down a little bit and the services aspect? Because it makes sense, right? Years ago, it was hard to build a community around the game because a lot of these channels didn't exist. There was no Discord. Steam was there, but maybe not as community focused, right? And as you mentioned, there's a lot of avenues to get out there as a game developer right now. So when you're an indie gamer and you're trying to determine, do I want to go to a publisher? Do I want to get funding some other route? What are some of the services that you kind of think a publisher can offer that help enable them?
Yeah. So one of the main ones that people immediately think of is marketing, PR, community supports, social support, asset creation, all of those areas to help you help just get the basics down, like making sure that you have the art around your game that can be showcased in the best possible way and really stand out. Especially like if you look at Steam, you go into there and you just see a ton of artwork, like just covers, and you want something that can stand out in that platform. So the marketing, paid marketing, influencer marketing, all of those pieces are a big piece of what a publisher is. But what makes a publisher different than, let's say, a marketing agency that you could hire to do some of those things as well, is all of the other pieces that are involved, including like production. So production support, helping with milestones, helping to understand where you are along the journey towards releasing the game, what is going to be needed along that journey, quality assurance, making sure that the game is tested and making sure that it's up to the quality bar, because we know if you don't have a really polished experience and you try to put it out in today's world, you will get crushed by the consumers. And so QA is such a vital piece. Localization. If you're trying to go wider, there are some key languages you need to be putting into your game, which means you need to set up the game in the right way, which is part of what a publisher helps to do, is really ensure that the game is set up for success in multiple languages and can really be put in. Because you look at a language like German and the words get ridiculously long, and if you aren't set up, like, it's not just like, oh, I'm just going to put the dialogue in. No, it really has to fit right in both the screen experience, how someone expects to see that dialogue show up, and that it's not like running into itself or overlapping with other things. There's a lot that goes into that. And then some other aspects include release management, where how do you get it onto these platforms? Each platform has a different certification process. What is needed in order to do that? And the relationships around the platforms, and then the biz dev piece. So much of ensuring that a game has a return on investment and is profitable is additional layers of business development, including once you have a game out, licensing it out, so that additional platforms can use it. Amazon's free games with Amazon is an example of that. And then also making sure that you have opportunities to port to new platforms over time. If you want to take it from PC to Xbox to PlayStation, all of those are porting, and we either know porting vendors or know how the process works, or have people internally as a publisher that can help you port, because it can be pretty costly, $50,000 to $150,000 to port to a new platform. And so you have to really know what you're doing and justify what it is. And then there's different programs that help you do that as well, and the relationships around that. Plus, like a lot of other biz dev opportunities, whether it be in the physical space or other things that kind of come up, and we manage all of those pieces as well. And then obviously the finance piece, which I've already talked about. But so yeah, you have to be able to do all the tactical work, all the marketing work, know the financials, know the market opportunities. So a lot of data work as well, and kind of combine it all into one thing that makes up publishing.
Is it fair to say basically you're taking a lot of things off those developers' plates that maybe they don't even think about, right? Maybe they don't even know that, hey, I need to think about marketing. I'm not even there yet. Is it fair to say that a publisher is going to help you and enable you to do that, and probably at scale, right? So costs can come down?
Yeah, it's exactly it. It's different. Either developers don't know or don't want to do those things, and a publisher takes that off a developer's plate so that they can focus on what their core, what they most likely want to do the most, which is develop the game. And so a publisher really kind of helps with everything around it. And as things pop up, having a publisher available to say, "Hey, I've never done this before. How do we do this?" And a publisher can come in and be like, "Okay, this is how we can go about it," or we just know other people that do those kinds of very specific things that pop up over time, because there's always new business opportunities and things. And so a publisher is really a connector and a network for a developer to really tap into whatever they need in the moment.
I don't know the proper way to ask this, so I'm going to ask it. Is what is a studio? And point blank, it doesn't have to be Midwest, right? But what does a studio give up to sign
Hmm.
with a publisher?
Yeah. So there's a couple different ways to think about it. What a developer has is they have rev share in their game, and they have IP that they're building essentially with the game that they have. So that is what they have to give. And oftentimes, what they don't have is money to develop the game. Whereas a publisher has money and they have time, and they are looking for something that will maximize within the time that they have the potential, you know, dollars that they have to invest in something. And and so that is typically the relationship is a a developer is giving up back end dollars rev share for front end money and support, um, off of a publisher's time. And a publisher, can only sign so many games, so it has to really maximize whatever that one game is that they are signing, or the multiple games over time within their portfolio. And so it's kind of an exchange between that. But how that looks, it can look in so many different ways. The thing is that publishers make the most majority of the revenue in the industry. Like it's an unfair advantage to have a publisher, because it gets you a lot of things. Now, that's not saying every publisher, but in general, it is an advantage to have a publisher. Um, uh, so off of that, it is, what are you willing to give up, rev share wise and IP? Traditionally, you can see anything from, your rev share giving up 70 to 30%, like somewhere in that range. I'm sure there's deals that go above or below that depending on the factors. But you have to think about, like, all like, it's really just a calculation of how much are are you asking a developer or a publisher to invest, and then what does the publisher think is the market return on that investment, and off of that they will calculate out what they would need from a rev share perspective. And then the IP rights come into play depending on the philosophy of the publisher. I'm a fan of IP rights, but of making sure the developer still has majority IP rights, because I want them making sure that then the ones driving forward what the IP is doing, what the next thing is. But I love being attached to it because that is the most valuable long term piece. And we can help it get into additional places over time. Each publisher is going to have their network that brings certain things to the table. For me, my team's background includes, me at Netflix or my CMO from Crunchyroll. Additional things that over time, each one of those companies are getting into games and getting into games content, and so those are valuable connection pieces that you want your publisher to have. And so it might be worth giving up more in order to get somebody that has those connections. And so yeah, it's a balancing act. There's no one does it the same as another person. Some people have it very open and transparent. Some people hide it because the deals are highly dependent upon what the game is and what they're asking for. Um, there's no perfect way to do it. And publishers get critiqued around this piece of things quite a bit because there isn't as much transparency. I understand why there isn't. That doesn't mean that there can't be more. I think there can be more, but it is very much a balancing act between those multiple factors.
I'm thinking of example as you're talking through this, and tell me I'm completely wrong, right? But I want to know if I'm on the right track here. As you know, back in the day on N64, I see the controller behind you, right? GoldenEye came out, and everyone loved it, and then Rare got acquired by Microsoft, but they couldn't publish GoldenEye. Is that because Nintendo was the publisher for Rare during GoldenEye and had the IP rights to that specific game?
Uh, it probably had something to do around some level of exclusivity back then. Especially exclusivity was a huge factor that's kind of died down these days, especially with Xbox not really doing exclusive content in a large way. So yeah, there's likely some kind of licensing piece to the game that didn't allow for it to go, or they just didn't want to port it. Uh, there's a lot of factors when multiple companies and there's acquisitions and all that stuff come into play. The agreements get very complicated, and so that is likely a factor in kind of why it stayed on a certain platform, or that they just didn't see the market opportunity, which seems a bit ridiculous considering. But you just never know exactly the reason unless you know the contract. So a lot of people speculate why certain things happen. Really, it all comes down to the contracts and what's allowed and what's negotiated between the developer and the publisher, and the platform. Sometimes it's the platforms get involved as well, and you have some kind of deal between that is brokered between like three different entities, and it creates a lot of complexity. And then trying to weed through that complexity and bring it to new places or trying to do something after the fact, it gets very complicated. It's why a lot of IPs are strung up in such complicated webs that they can never have anything ever made again, because a certain company has certain rights to a certain piece and they get sign off on something, whereas another company also gets sign off. And getting two companies to agree on something that might not benefit them much just becomes ridiculously complicated. And that's why ultimately a lot of IP gets shelved and can't ever be used because there's no way to really bring all of those disparate pieces to the table and use them in the right way.
When you have your own indie studio, how do you know it's the right time to start looking for a publisher? Do they come to you? Do they pitch to you? I mean, what are those signs that it's time to start finding them?
So game studios come to publishers. Publishers very rarely go to game studios, just because from a volume perspective, we get hundreds upon hundreds, I think thousands of pitches at this point. And we're a very small publisher. If you're known, like the amount that you just get sent is absurd. And it's a really challenging space to be able to keep up with the volume of games that are being made and pitches that are out there. But ultimately, you should be trying to get a publisher as early as possible, but you need something to show in order to do it. So the balancing act is the minute you have something that can portray what the future game is going to look like or play like, that's when you really want to start looking for that publisher and looking for that partner or that investor or whatever route you want to take. It really comes down to when you have something that you can showcase for uh, for those folks to really get a good idea. Because what you don't want to do is show something that's so early that they get the wrong idea of what it is, and you also don't want to wait so long. Because part of it being you just can't. Like a lot of devs will have the money or the time to work towards getting the prototype, but getting something to alpha or beta, like it's just very expensive, and they likely don't have the team built out to do that. And so really it's like getting something that is ultimately just is going to show off what your idea and what the potential of the game is.
So indie studios basically want to have a little bit of a portfolio of their game showing either artwork or gameplay or some sort of story or all the above and how it's running so they could be able to submit a portfolio and you can get, or the publisher can get a better perspective of what is being built.
Yeah, it's really, this is where like even AI benefits a developer, because like the concepting of something, like saying, hey, it's going to look like this. Um, AI is really good at doing that without a ton of work. Now, actually developing that is really tough, and AI is not going to, only can do so much. And so the idea of creating a concept or the narrative piece of it, you can tell a story pretty easily. Now you have to have the time to do it, and can you break it down in the right ways? The story piece is more easy to tell, and that's where a lot of decks are pretty heavy on the story piece of what this world they're building and all that kind of stuff is. But what is going to make a difference is, well, what differentiates this thing? Is it the gameplay? Is it are you blending genres? Are you making a new genre? Are you going off of something that exists and you are improving it? And really, the proof is in the pudding with that. You got to really see it, play it to know if that's actually going to become true. And so, your history and background help and indicate that, like you've done it before. But a lot of people claim that they've done it before, and they worked on these big games or something like that. And I think a publisher gets more wary of that, because so often people are like, oh well, I worked for X company and I worked on this huge game, and it's like, cool, but so did 1,000 other people, and what makes you the one that can make a new experience? And so it's the challenge of like vetting out and doing the due diligence around somebody. Are they the ones that actually drove forward something, or are they ones that iterated on a small piece of that, which is okay. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And the hard part is it an indicator? Like even if you work on just a small piece of something, doesn't mean you can't do something incredible. And so uh, for a publisher, like trying to figure out what the right formula of things, and who to take the bet on when there's thousands of people saying, I've got a great game, it's going to do great. It's really difficult to know like which ones truly are. And the even tougher part is great games go out almost every day now, and great games fail all the time. So having a great game is a baseline to get in to the market. And so it's what is going to make it stand out in market that ultimately becomes a major factor.
Yeah, I think some people, or maybe what's often overlooked, is that timing is probably one of the most important factors in all this. When's your game coming out? And you can be as specific as you want, right? But it really depends on how the market's going to adopt it. I mean, you often see games pushed because, hey, we know this game's coming out here and we don't want to release against that. But, right? I mean, no matter what product you have, whether it be a game, whether it's be a SaaS service or any type of product you're putting out there, timing is probably one of those key elements that's often overlooked, because a crappy game can hit it if the timing is right, and all of a sudden it finds the audience, right? It really can go either way.
Well, yeah, you just never know, and yeah, timing is an incredibly important piece of all of this, and you have very little control over it. You try to aim for the right timing or what you think is the right timing, and then some other market factor comes in that you had no idea about, that you there's no way you would have known about, and it ruins your launch. Or the other end, where something happens. I know a game studio that put out a game that did incredibly well, and it just happened to come after a highly anticipated game that was very similar, failed pretty badly in market, and this other game was like almost the oh wait, well, they failed, this one's actually the one that we were hoping that one was. And so then suddenly they got all this momentum off of a disgruntled group of people around a game that suddenly what attached on this other game and made that other game succeed in a much larger way. And so you just never know, you can't predict those kinds of things happening. But what you have to do is react to the market. So what I encourage folks to do is be ready to pivot towards how the market is reacting to the game or to other market factors, and be in the moment, because being in the moment could make the difference between being successful or not.
I want to go back to something you said a little earlier, is that if you're a big publisher, you're getting probably hundreds and hundreds of games and trying to determine which one's the right one. Who at the publisher is actually looking at these games?
It depends on how the structure is set up, and every publisher does this differently. Some, it's a single person that makes the executive decision. A lot of times, especially if it's a larger one, they have a biz dev person that's evaluating, putting together all the details into a deck, laying out the opportunities, and then presenting it to a group of people. Some people do it by committee. Some people do it like we do a process of, it goes to like certain groups over time. And essentially, if it gets into that process, it means it's already, top 30% of what we receive. And then from there, it goes through to each group. They evaluate it in their own ways, give feedback to it, and essentially dissent as well, like saying, like, because if it's in the process, we like it, but saying like, oh, these are the areas that I don't think it's gonna be able to overcome whatever piece it is, which is valuable to me because then I get everyone's input in a way, and they're thinking critically about the opportunity ahead. It allows people to get involved, but it's not a committee. Committee making decisions is really tough. I don't believe in committees, and ultimately, on our end, I'm the person that's accountable at the end of the day, and so right now, I'm that person making the call. That might not be the case long term, but having the one person that's accountable for making the decisions on something, I think is a useful way. But yeah, it could be any which way that you can imagine. It could be the way that they evaluate and source games and make decisions around it.
I was gonna say, it kind of sounds like a dream job being able to check out all these games, but it's probably once you're in the weeds of it, it's like, oh god, there's so many things I need to look at, so many games I need to install, so many
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So many games you need to play. It's tough. Like playing games that aren't finished is not necessarily a very fun thing, because it's a lot of broken things. You have to you have to look through all the fact that the whole thing is broken and see what the developer is doing and building. So in a way, it's really fun because if you're somebody that enjoys um, you know the opportunity of something, the excitement of something new, and are willing to, like, look past some of the challenges that are right and more immediately in front of you. You can see, like, oh yeah, I could see it being this thing, but getting it to that point is also vastly complicated. And so yeah, it's a fun piece of things. And then, for game developers, it's just it becomes so challenging to present something to a publisher because it's just there's so much unknown. And another thing, I'll say is as much as every developer's like, look at my like completely unique, completely like uh like I created this thing game um through no fault of their own, sometimes an unconscious piece. I might have seen five other games that are almost exactly the same thing. Even if it is, original in some way. It's hard to be original these days because you get influenced a lot of times subconsciously uh, from other factors, from the things you like, and you put that into it. And as much as you think it's original, when you're sitting in, my seat or other publishers' seats, it looks a lot of the same across things, which is why, if a developer ever feels like they're ever curious why a publisher is hesitant to do sign an NDA or anything like that, it's because we see five of those things. So let's say we go forward with one of them, and then one of the other ones goes, "You stole my idea." It's like, no, somebody else pitched something completely separate, and we went forward with their idea. And if you have an NDA in place, it can create complications. And then also NDAs are hard to actually like legally, like getting someone to have repercussions from breaking an NDA is incredibly tough to prove in court. So it's adding legal complications to something that already has a lot of complications, and it's just and I get how developers feel about this because they're in their like to them it is original. To them it is that it's just people don't realize the kind of influence the culture has and how people will come up with very similar ideas off of it.
Are there any red flags you can share with some of those indie developers out there that they may want to avoid or pitfalls when they are thinking about their pitch to a publisher?
Uh, I mean, there's plenty of things like pitch decks. I've seen all the range of different types of pitch decks. Don't try to show your entire game in a pitch deck. You have 10 to 12 slides at the most to show what a game is. Um, but red flags will come around the kind of content you're trying to put out. A lot of times developers aren't thinking about the audience they're trying to hit. They're making a game for themselves, which can succeed. Like sometimes those types of games do succeed because it just happens that the game for themselves also happens to be a game for a few million people as well. But then other times, a game for yourself is truly just a game for yourself. And so, you know, someone being aware of the audience that they are trying to hit is a green flag for me. But if they don't have that information, if they're not thinking about that, that's something that we then are going to have to put some work into if we are interested in the concept, because they haven't presented any evidence in that area yet. Um, some other red flags are if you don't know how to lay out a milestone schedule, or you don't know how to you know accurately look at competitive you know an analysis of who are your comps in market. If you can't accurately like compare against what is already out there and be able to say, hey, this is why there's an opportunity, that's a flag to me. Or if it's just you just throw out, oh yeah, Minecraft or something like just extreme where you're like, okay, like that just makes you roll your eyes. Sure, do like a higher level one, but also do a moderate and a low, because if you can show all three, then you can see, okay, well, even in the low scenario, like a game that didn't, it still got, let's say, a return on investment, or it still made money. Like, because that's what a publisher is. As much as like, we love games, we just want to get games made. We also have to make money, or we can't continue to fund more games. And so we have to take it through the lens of what is the opportunity. But most publishers don't really know. I think I take the stance of no one, like the consumers decide what is a successful game. It's like if you look at all the data, the amount of games until you have like a franchise and are able to continually put out something off of a successful previous thing, creating new IP and putting out something new is incredibly hard, and it's really random, which is why it's a bit of a percentages games. If you work in a certain genre and the genre has a breakout rate of let's say 25%, that means if you do 4 games in that genre, like statistically, one of those should break out. And when I say breakout, it means make over $1 million. And that data is available. You can see a lot of that, especially like the Steam data piece of it. And so those are the kinds of things that I think you can succeed with is looking at the data. That doesn't guarantee like statistically you go 0 for 4. Statistically you go 2 for 4. It's just understanding the data and making some decisions with the data in mind. But you also have to lean into areas of you might not have much data. If it's truly a new genre, a new attempt on something, you're not going to have a bunch of data to say, oh, this is going to succeed. You have to then take a bet off of what you think something can do and know that that's a riskier bet. And as a publisher, you have a grouping of the riskier bets, and then you have a grouping of the more conservative bets, the ones that statistically do better. Strategy games like in tactics on PC, like on Steam, those statistically do better on that platform, and so those are safer bets. But they also are bets that strategy games don't necessarily travel well to other platforms. Xbox, PlayStation, like some do, right? But overall, they don't tend to port well. So you have a bit of a ceiling on those types of games, whereas some other new approach you just never know what it's going to be, but it's also highly risky at that point. And so a publisher's job is really to mitigate risk across a portfolio and try to balance it in many different buckets. And those buckets could be very different depending on what the publisher is.
I love that. And I do a lot of posting on different social networks now. And it's funny, I kind of see a resemblance where if you're releasing a kid's game, maybe you want to make sure you hit the Switch and maybe you want to make sure you hit another thing, right? Knowing where your audience lives, where they play, where they do all this stuff, I think maybe gets often overlooked. And I think that's great. And I know we're running up on time and I have one last request from you. So you can go and you can enjoy your holidays, but you want to talk about any of the games that you do have going on at Midwest right now that you're helping publish?
Yeah, so we in the last month and a half, 2 months, we announced 2 more titles for our portfolio. One of them we announced the Xbox Partner Preview Showcase called The Legend of Babu. Um, this is like we like to call it Baby God of War, or like Dog of War is the funny one, because it's basically an adventure game like Legend of Zelda style, with your companion is a big dog named Babu, and Babu and Sapir go on this adventure. Sapir's trying to find his mother, who has been stolen by demons, and he has to go across this land that's very similar to like Avatar: The Last Airbender. The 4 elements, and it's really an incredible like story and just a fun experience. If you've ever played Kenna, it's very similar to Kenna in some ways, and we're super excited about that game and what Babu could do, and how excited people are to see this big fluffy dog, which you can ride, you can pet, you can play as. So we announced that one, and then we just announced at the PC Gamer um, Most Wanted showcase a game called Tomb Water, which is basically a Souls-like Western. So Bloodborne meets Red Dead meets like classic Zelda, a pixelated adventure. It is an awesome RPG. I found it randomly at a small event in Columbus, Ohio called GDEX that I was the only publisher at, and found this incredible developer, single person developer, Max Moraz, who has done just incredible work in his career. And uh, and my favorite part of it was when I first met him, he had hung his sign with a mic stand and a broomstick, and then he won Game of Show because he has just an absolutely like a masterpiece on his hands. And so we're really excited to announce that, and excited for people to check that out. So those two, like, you can wish list. Game we just put out recently, and actually, has been just put on sale as well, is a game called Dark Sky, which, the best way to describe it's like a non-roguelike deck builder that's like a JRPG. Incredible title from an incredible studio in New Mexico. And then we have a bunch of others as well that we put out over this last year, including The Lullaby of Life, Duck Paradox, and Hive Jump 2 Survivors. And we're doing some bundles and things like that with Midwest Games, so you can get them all at a discount with the Midwest Games bundle. But incredible, indie developers from underserved places around the world. Ledger Babu's from Turkey. The Lullaby of Life is from Mexico. I mentioned Ohio. And so, trying to help support these underserved developers. And then the other one we've announced previously that hasn't come out yet is Floor is What, from a studio in Wisconsin, Josh, which I know you've met before a couple times and chatted with. And Josh is doing just incredible things at Pyramid Lake Games. And they have a great party game called Floor is What, which we're really excited about, and definitely go wishlist that as well.
Cool. We'll have information about Midwest Games. We'll have link to their Steam stuff so you can see all this information. This was awesome, Ben. I really enjoy learning all about this and how a publisher works. I appreciate it. And if there's anything else you have to say, go for it. But I really appreciate your time today.
No, I appreciate it. You can follow Midwest Games on all of our socials. We have a couple big announcements coming in January, so get ready for that. Hope everyone has happy holidays. Hope you do as well, Greg, and I appreciate the time.